Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. The HiT cast offers a weekly look at Hollywood from a conservative point of view. Sick of media bias infecting Hollywood headlines? Tired of stars insulting your views? HiT has your back. Now, here's your host, Christian Toto.
Welcome to episode 102 of the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. This week we're speaking with filmmaker Ted Balaker. He directed the excellent documentary Can We Take a Joke and produced last year's sensational drama Little Pink House. He's a true fighter on behalf of free speech and someone who insists that telling quality stories matters even more than sending any kind of message on screen. How refreshing. This week's show is sponsored by Speakeasy Ideas. Here's a message for homeschooling families from Dr. Thomas Kranwitter, president of Speakeasy Ideas. You know, freedom is never more than one generation away from being lost, depending in large measure on how free citizens educate their children. And while we have no shortage of problems in our modern U.S., the future is brighter, more hopeful, due to the good work to which you've dedicated yourself, teaching your kids. Speakeasy Ideas wants to be your partner for homeschool civic education. That's why we've introduced a new online civics course, complete with curriculum, titled The Political Science of the American Founding. The course will help your student become prepared for the rights and duties of being a citizen by learning the political science behind the great American experiment in constitutional self-government. The Political Science of the American Founding is the result of my scholarly research and writing combined with years of experience teaching American government at Claremont McKenna College, Hillsdale College, and George Mason University. The materials included in the course have been selected, arranged, and packaged to supplement all kinds of curricula. You can easily modify these materials to be used for many learning levels, ranging from young students to high schoolers. To learn more about the new online civics class for homeschoolers, I invite you to go to speakeasyideas.com/homeschool. That's speakeasyideas.com/homeschool. Congratulations to you and your homeschooling children. Thanks again for your good work and your interest in a sound civic education. Well, they're back. The Ghostbusters will return to theaters starting in 2020. Part of me wants to let out a big old yawn. I mean, yes, the original film is a classic, no doubt. It's Bill Murray at his best, and there's nothing quite as good as that. But, you know, is this the kind of stuff that we need to have story after story after story? And does anyone remember how bad Ghostbusters 2 was? I watched it recently. Wow, jaw-droppingly bad. If you haven't seen it in a while, watch a few minutes. You'll be reminded, too, why the franchise really stopped cold after that. Now, the new Ghostbusters film is going to be directed by the original film's director. So Ivan Reitman did the first one. Jason Reitman, a terrific director in his own right, he's going to handle the sequel. And it will be a connected story from Ghostbusters 1 and Ghostbusters 2. And, well, probably just ignore that whole Ghostbusters reboot from 2 years ago. Not too shocking. That movie was forced on us, and we were scolded into liking it or else. It was kind of the perfect movie, and I use the word perfect in scare quotes for our social justice age. The audiences, of course, recoiled at the lectures and didn't make it a huge enough hit to warrant more sequels. So that story's gone. A new story will emerge. What's interesting about this whole thing, though, is that how the media covered the news that we're going to get a new Ghostbusters again. Several major sites, including Forbes.com, which has a lot of hard-left coverage of the entertainment world, they were pretty sad about the whole thing. Well, the internet trolls have won, they cried. At least that's how they framed it. It turns out people would rather laugh than get lectured to, and I don't think that's any surprise on any level. Some film scribes just don't understand that, though, and they were so invested in the success of that reboot with the Lady Ghostbusters, they're still smarting over it. Well, it's time to get over it. Now, having said all that, I think the new film will be a modest hit. I don't think it's going to be a blockbuster, unless it's very, very funny. And I'm sure that Bill Murray will probably have a cameo after the other cast members beg and plead and cajole with him to kind of get back on board. He's just kind of a ornery guy. I don't mean that in a mean way. He just follows his own path, goes to the beat of his own drummer, and I don't think he's very, very interested in the Ghostbusters in any capacity. Matter of fact, his cameo in the 2016 film was easily the worst Bill Murray moment on screen in his entire career. He was absolutely mentally checked out, and I don't know how anyone didn't just kind of pull him aside and say, hey, Bill, if you're going to be on screen, at least going to go through the motions. You look terrible. He was awful in that movie, and it was very clear he didn't want to be there. Well, come a year and a half, we're going to get a new Ghostbusters film, and listen, I'll give it a try. I'm sure there'll be a lot of razzle-dazzle behind it. I'm sure they'll keep the budget just low enough, so if it makes enough money, they'll have sequel after sequel, and that's just fine. That's just the way Hollywood works right now. And who are you going to call?
You're listening to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment.
Here's a celebrity tweet of the week. Comedian Michael Ian Black is best known on Twitter for saying that the NRA is a terrorist organization. Oh, and once in a while he tells a mediocre joke or two. But this week, he's got a killer message for those who doubt the whole Trump-Russia connection. Or at least he thinks it's pretty killer. Here we go. Worth pausing to remember that, in all this time, not a single exculpatory fact has emerged to disprove the hypothesis that Trump is a corrupt crook and hawk to Russia. Huh. Never mind that Trump is often tougher on Russia than his flexible predecessor, or that no evidence exists to prove this. Well, who needs evidence? You've got a hypothesis. That's all you need.
Don't touch that dial. You're listening to my daddy's podcast.
My hit tip of the week is The Punisher. Season 2 of the show is available right now, and it's a doozy. At least the first 4 episodes are. That's how many I watched before the official debut over this weekend. But listen, I've got a lot of things to do. I wish I could watch the whole series. I will eventually, but I thought 4 episodes was a good sample size to kind of figure out, is this going in the right direction? And to me, it completely is. Now, again, starring Jon Bernthal, a very good actor. He's perfectly cast as Frank Castle. And I have to say, Netflix has done an amazing job with the casting. I love Charlie Cox as Daredevil. Kristen Ritter as Jessica Jones. Perfect. Mike Coulter as Luke Cage. Right on target. Bernthal is just part of that very good tradition. This time around, Frank is fighting a killer who just so happens to be a man of faith. Cue the cliche alert. Christians are always a go-to villain for Hollywood. That hasn't changed a bit. But having said that, actor Josh Stewart, who plays the killer here, John Pilgrim is his name, he is sensational. He's the best kind of villain in my eyes. He is cool, he is calm, he is soft-spoken, and he vibrates with menace. It's a great character, and I'm looking to see how far it goes as the episode's going to go on, but I'm all in. Of course, it's a Punisher show. You got plenty of gunfire, some good action sequences, but to me, the whole series revolves around Jon Bernthal and how he digs into the character. This is a guy who's lost everything, and there's still a flicker of humanity there, but it's so bruised, it's so broken, and every time he tries to reclaim it, something else gets in the way, and maybe partly he's to blame. It's fascinating. Now, given how easily Netflix is canceling these Marvel shows, this could be 2 seasons and out, and then maybe it's up to Disney and their streaming service to take over or go in a new direction. But if this is the Punisher swan song, so far so good. The Punisher Season 2 is available right now on Netflix.
I'm Patrick Corelchi.
And I'm Adriana Cortez, and we're the hosts of Red Pilled America, a new storytelling podcast.
Red Pilled America is not another talk show covering the day's news. We are all about telling stories. Stories Hollywood doesn't want you to hear. Stories the media mocks. Stories about everyday Americans that the elites ignore. You could think of Red Pilled America as audio documentaries, and we promise only one thing: the truth.
Visit the iHeartRadio app right now to listen to Red Pilled America.
Now let's get to this week's HitCast interview. I first heard about Ted Balaker a couple of years ago when I started reading about a documentary called Can We Take a Joke? It looked at comedians who were talking about free speech. It examined what's happening on college campuses. It was a very good, very sobering show. Now, I have to say, it's already about a couple of years old, and it's already, in a sense, dated. I feel like the social justice crowd has gotten even stronger, even more violent, and even more powerful, and that's all very bad news, but I hope that he in some way will kind of reconnect with this subject because there's a lot of new stories to tell. Now, if you thought that was good, even better was Little Pink House, about that Kelo Supreme Court decision. That was an excellent movie, came out later last year, and of course it didn't get into the awards season hullabaloo, but It's good all the same. If you can stream it or watch it right now, definitely recommend it. Catherine Keener is outstanding as Suzette Kilo. It's a wonderful film. Now, I'm not surprised by any of that because Ted's a very good filmmaker. He's smart, he's shrewd, he knows how to tell a story first and foremost, and if there's a message to be told, it is organically embedded in the material. It's not full of lectures, it's not in your face, it's just part of the narrative, and that's exactly the best way to send a message and entertain. Now, Ted's going to weigh in a little bit about that movie, about its impact, and a lot more in this interview. Hope you enjoy it. Here's my chat with Ted Balaker. Well, Ted, thank you for joining the show. I know a lot of your work focuses on limited government and free speech issues, and we just saw Kevin Hart, one of the biggest movie stars around, enjoy his Oscar gig for all of about a day and a half. Is that sort of a blip in the cultural radar, or is it say something more insidious about what's going on in the culture?
Yeah, I think it's kind of the new normal. In the first place, I'm sort of surprised that the producers there at the show didn't vet that more than they did, because they're the ones that have the are very sensitive to this, and you think could have had an intern spend half an hour looking at his old tweets or something. But yeah, I think you're seeing this now. There's a certain segment of the population that likes to dig up old tweets. I think it's especially bad when, like you saw with the guy who won the Heisman Trophy Award for college football, said some things when he was like 14 and 15 that were deemed inappropriate by the people who do these things nowadays.
The deemers.
Right. And out there's somebody, there's some 35-year-old journalist who, sees that this guy who wins the Heisman and then decides that he's going to go check his tweets from when he was in high school. I think that, if all of us, I'm very grateful that, I'm older, so, at least old enough so that I don't have, any 14-year-old tweets or tweets when I was 14. I don't, I wouldn't have done anything like that anyway. But you never know, what kinds of things will be deemed inappropriate in the future. And I always kind of have to chuckle at the outrage mobsters these days, because they seem to think that they themselves have reached this realm of perfection, and that nothing that they do today will be looked back at in kind of in grimaced and with with your shaking your fist at them by their grandkids, for instance. I'm sure today there's some 24-year-old keyboard warriors who are doing things that are going to horrify their kids and grandkids. And I wonder how, if they might appreciate some level of mercy at that point.
Well, that's a great point. I think we often talk about, we're kind of not our full selves at 15, so we shouldn't be, expected to pay trouble, have a penalty for that. But what we think today is acceptable and open and honest and good may be not so good. And you mentioned kids and grandkids. It could be 10 years. It could be 5 years. I mean, I think about the word queer was kind of reclaimed by people who are gay in a defiant way, and that's fine. I have no issue with that. But to say that word, 10 years ago maybe was offensive, and now it's okay in the right context. So it's a very kind of slippery cultural slope that we're looking at. I want to talk a little bit, just kind of hit the rewind button on one part of your career I wasn't aware of until recently. Was you worked at ABC News, and I'm kind of curious, as a filmmaker, as someone who kind of examines the culture, what did you learn from that experience? What did you take away from the time at ABC News?
Oh yeah, that was great. That was my first real job, so to speak. I worked for John Stossel at ABC News, doing ABC News specials and 2020 pieces. So we did and we did a piece on an hour on free speech then too. And back then the big thing was this guy was retelling kind of racy Seinfeld episode, I think literally at the water cooler, and a female colleague overheard it. And so that was one of the workplace issues. And I also happened to meet my Courtney, who was working at ABC News, and after rejecting me for about 6 months, is now my wife for many years. And we kind of joke that, I was working on a piece about sexual harassment in the workplace and what you can and cannot say. And I was kind of, trying it out in the workplace too. But to your question, it was a fantastic experience, working for John and learning from the older producers. It was, I think it was a really great experience. It's kind of like a baptism by fire. And I think that a lot of young people would really benefit from something like that, because, I grew up in San Diego, and it's funny. I always joke that if John Stossel is bigoted toward anyone, it's Californians. And he would say, like, we have deadlines here, like there are no deadlines in San Diego. But I think that just the magnitude of the pressure and the deadlines, and if somebody wants something, you're already late by the time they ask you for it. I think it's a level of intensity that a lot of people working in either journalism or news or film, I think some get, but I think a lot more would really benefit from getting that. And this was a time network news was a slowly sinking ship, but it was still the biggest ship in the ocean. And we had, massive audiences that would consume our products. And so if you screwed up, lots and lots of people would know about it. Mm-hmm. And so I think it really helped. I think coming out of school, I was probably more into ideas and not so adept at conveying those ideas through pictures yet. And so that was a great way to really help me hone those skills or start to develop them at least. Mm-hmm. So if you have an idea, if you want to reach people who don't already subscribe to that idea, how do you do it? And that's kind of a big question that Courtney and I, kind of tangle with on a daily basis, even today.
Yeah. I want to talk about your film, Can We Take a Joke? It's wonderful. It's kind of the first time I really took note of the work that you were up to. And I think it's about 2 or 3 years old. I mean, but again, the culture moves so quickly. If you made that movie today, kind of starting from scratch, would it be radically different? Would you maybe track down different sources? What do you think has changed within the stand-up comedy community since then? I mean, we kind of touched on a little bit with this Kevin Hart situation, but beyond the Oscars, how have things changed since then?
Well, things have gotten a lot worse, I think. So if anything, I hope, we would have had a lot better. What we had there was, for the folks who aren't familiar with it, it addresses when comedy and outrage collide, and it spends a lot of time on college campuses. And so at that time, it was, it's funny, it was released in 2016. When I guess we did our festival premiere in the February before that, so 15. And I remember that when we were doing, Q&A after the premiere, somebody from the audience said, we just had this crazy thing at Yale where this young woman was reading the riot act to this man who was a professor at Yale, and then there was another thing at Missouri, and he was kind of tongue-in-cheek, accusing us of staging that in order to get more for the film. And so, we all had a good laugh at that. But, fast forward just a few years, and there was no, what we had at Berkeley or, the violence that was at Middlebury regarding Charles Murray. What we see is that, I think, Can We Take a Joke, was really ahead of the game in a lot of ways. It was kind of signaling that this stuff is coming. And we did, I believe, reference I mean, back then, even deplatforming wasn't a big thing. It was bigger in Europe than it was in the States. Mm-hmm. But usually what happens is all the bad ideas, if America doesn't have them already, they're going to be imported pretty soon. And places like Canada and Europe are often a good place to look for what's coming next for us. And so I really feel, I feel really sorry for stand-up comedians in college today. And we profiled some in Can We Take a Joke? And it's only gotten worse for them. It's such a tough thing to do, to be 18, 19-year-olds and try to make strangers laugh. And now you have to worry about, not offending people on top of that and possibly getting suspended. It seems like every day there's some crazy story. There's you may have heard this guy Patel, who I can't remember his first name. He's a writer for The Daily Show, and he recently performed at Columbia by some group called something like the Asian American Students Union. I might have it slightly wrong, but they hired him, and then in the course of telling a joke that was really like an anti-racist joke,
it was
just the fact that it mentioned race at all. They actually pulled the plug on him. So that's a whole new level of absurdity, where you have a student organization hire somebody who they trust will represent their point of view, but because he not only, it wasn't even good enough that he kind of towed the progressive line on race in America and stuff like that. It wasn't executed perfectly to their liking, and so they literally pulled the plug with about 30 minutes left. And you can read, folks can read about his take on the situation in the New York Times. They ran an opinion piece by him. So it's a very sad state of affairs, and I think things have really gotten worse, especially on college campuses, and really just for free expression in general.
Yeah, a couple notes. One, the show notes page at HollywoodInToto.com will have links to that op-ed from the comedian. I believe it's Nimesh Patel, and also just sort of the background there. I believe he's a writer for Saturday Night Live. He may have also worked for The Daily Show. But it leads to my next question. Why in the world is Saturday Night Live not mocking this culture, this outrage situation? They are sort of perfectly situated to do just that. They got the gravitas, the talent, the resources, and if they, face opposition, they should be strong enough to weather that storm, and they're not. The one joke I saw, I think it might have been last year, they did a bit called Woke Jeans, which was very funny. And but I think generally speaking, they are hands off on this matter when, to me, it directly affects them. Why the silence?
Well, I think a lot of it is herd mentality. It used to be that comedians, and you could say anything as long as it was funny. I think it was Richard Pryor who said that, and I believe that we even referenced that specifically in Can We Take a Joke? And I really think that led to such a great atmosphere among comedians, because you'd have people who had different points of view on things, but their primary goal wasn't to be right on, the minimum wage policy or something like that. It was to be funny. And so funny was first. And so you would have people with different points of view having, respectful conversations. But of course there's cursing and they're busting each other's chops as they should. But it was still from a place of love, kind of like if you're, with your brother or friends from high school or something like that. But nowadays, I think people have, I think a lot of it is, I try to be, generous to those I disagree with. So a lot of it is they sincerely believe these things and they think it's important, and they've been imbued with this idea that it's their duty on some level to just affirm certain points of view. You can go down the litany of policy positions, and there is a right position and a wrong position on almost everything you can think of. And those, what's right and wrong often changes by the week. But they're there. And so I think it's really too bad. I think comedy has suffered for it. On the other hand, it's an entrepreneurial opportunity for comedians who don't want to just toe the line. And frankly, you watch. I would encourage folks to watch like Ricky Gervais's last Netflix special. Tom Segura does Christina Pajitsky, who narrated Can We Take a Joke, by the way. There are a lot of very brave comedians out there who are hilarious, and you can see it. I think you can feel it in the atmosphere of their audience too. It's kind of like this, this release where, and usually what happens is the comedians are, very much on the side of, the progressive worldview, generally speaking, but they're still just being playful even within that point of view. And it's really great to see someone, spreading his or her wings and just being funny and being challenging. It's not just being, provocative necessarily for the sake of being provocative, but it's challenging people's comfort zones. And sometimes these comedians, even on when I agree with them on issues, there's just such a uniformity and blandness and kind of groupthink that I almost like, geez, I almost want to just disagree with them just because I'm just so sick of them, just agreeing with each other. It used to not be like that, it seems.
Yeah, and I think that one of the key elements of comedy is surprise, and without that surprise, I don't care how funny Stephen Colbert can be, I know exactly the take he's going to have on any given news story, so it is immediately sort of it kind of cuts away. I want to switch gears a little bit to Little Pink House, one of the best films of this year, and talk about making, from your perspective, you're making the movie with your wife, who was a previous HitCast guest as well. It's a good movie with a message baked in, but the message doesn't override the narrative, the drama. Was that harder than it looks to make that happen? Because I would think that there are a lot of people who try to do it that way and don't even succeed. I think your film does that. But was that balance one of the trickier elements of the production?
Yes, it was. And thank you for saying that and noticing that. Courtney and I feel very strongly about eminent domain abuse and Suzette Kilo's story. She was, of course, the subject of the film, and Little Pink House dramatizes her historic fight to save her Little Pink House and working class neighborhood in New London, Connecticut, from government cronies. But it's really difficult when you're passionate about something to you don't want to overdo it. I think it's funny. We always say it's like a Goldilocks thing. You can underdo it or you can overdo it. And you want to get it just right, just like with the porridge from Goldilocks. And so if you underdo it, and you see this with songs like Born in the USA and others where a lot of times the song is appropriated by people who completely missed the point of what the artist had in mind. And so I guess if you're an artist and you believe X and then everybody in the audience thinks you meant Y, that would probably be pretty frustrating.
But it also speaks to maybe the greatness of the art, that it can be interpreted so many different ways. It's just to kind of play devil's advocate there. Yeah.
And I always appreciate a good devil's advocate. I think you're right. But I also think it depends on what the artist has in mind too. If it's certainly something like a song can be, and frankly, even a movie, I guess any piece of art really can be just enjoyed on purely aesthetic grounds. But if you also, the motto of our company is making important ideas entertaining, but it's not like hitting people over the head with important. And it's also
slogan.
Right. Yeah. There have been plenty of people already doing that. And frankly, a lot of times it's far more lucrative because you just, you look at any, for instance, check out any bestseller list, usually on the nonfiction. It's like, 10 reasons why the left is destroying America, or 17 reasons why the right is destroying America. And I always wonder, or how, if you're making somebody hate Hillary Clinton a little bit more than they already did, or or hate, George W. Bush a little bit more than they already did. Like, what are you really doing? Is that considered progress? I don't know. I think it's far more difficult to engage people who maybe are on the fence, maybe are leaning in the other direction. But I think that's where the interesting stuff is when you're not just preaching to the converted. And so that makes it very, very difficult because people are, there's a whole literature about the science of persuasion, if you can really call it that. But there are certain things that tend to really not work very well. And frankly, to bring it back to what we were talking about previously, I think another reason why these outrage mobsters are so annoying is that when you are parading your emotions, you're really not persuading anybody. If anything, you're probably turning people off who already disagree with you or are on the fence. Mm-hmm. And so in some sense, people have a choice. You can either emote or persuade. And I think a lot of people, and frankly, there's outrage on both sides. It tends to be more, we see more of it on the left these days. But the people who just peddle an outrage, I think they're kind of really shooting themselves in the foot. If their goal is to really change things, now if their goal is to sell books or sell movies, oftentimes that is a sensible path because you're really just marketing the film to the people who already agree with you, and that was a huge challenge, but also opportunity with Little Pink House. We had people we had Institute for Justice who's very much involved. We had David Crosby, who, is famously a very progressive guy. We had very progressive, women in film organizations, but also property rights organizations. And Courtney and I were joking. We always joke that it was like we're inviting a bunch of people who hate each other to a party. You just wonder how it's going to end up.
That's right. But they all got along, so that's the good thing.
Yes,
by the way, I think the outrage culture made that song "Baby It's Cold Outside" a hit again, so sometimes it does bounce back.
Yeah, and I think right. I'm glad you pointed that out, and I really do think that there's. I don't know if I want to resurrect the term "silent majority," but I think there are a lot of people. There's kind of an emperor has no clothes aspect to a lot of this, and there are lots of polls that are coming out that say that majorities of Americans, particularly Latinos, for reasons I'm not totally clear on, really bristle at the idea of political correctness.
Huh, interesting. Ted, before we let you go, I had one last question. I want to give you a chance to do a little bit of a victory lap and kind of show the power of pop culture. We had an email exchange offline, and you talked about what happened after Little Pink House hit, and it wasn't just a box office number. It was much bigger than that. And just maybe share with listeners a little bit about its impact, how it sort of swayed people or what happened after the movie was released. Because I think it kind of shows you what you can do when you make good product and it has a message of consequence and also is not, like you said, bludgeoned by that particular ideal. So what were sort of the happy side effects of the movie's release?
Yeah, well, thanks. We had a congressional screening, bipartisan congressional screening with members of Congress on both sides. First time that's happened for a feature film since Spielberg's Lincoln. We've had policy change, reforms passed, and cases of eminent domain abuse reversed thanks to the film. The film has reached a lot of people who just from even on set, we have all kinds of stories of our very progressive crew members really responding to Suzette's story and realizing that none of this tyranny would have happened but for the influence of government. So Pfizer was not a good actor in this, but Pfizer could have tried to do this on their own and they would have failed because only government has the power to bully people in this way. And so I think it was the way that we were, Courtney and Suzette were doing Q&A and in front of audiences of, hundreds of people who would have never, ever in the first place, let in a film with that addresses these themes of liberty and private property and cronyism, let alone receiving it with such passion, and then on top of that, we and Courtney, especially Courtney and Suzette, were able to talk to people on their own turf about these ideas, and it was just far more receptive than just right bashes left and left bashes right.
It's amazing, and that's just part of the reasons why these movies like this matter. And Ted, you've made a couple, and I'm sure you'll be making more in the years to come. Thank you for joining the HitCast. Please watch Little Pink House. It's streaming right now on Amazon Prime, and also you can rent or buy Can We Take a Joke? It's a really essential documentary. It looks at the fight for free speech on campuses and elsewhere, and you can go to canwetakeajoke.com for more information how you could buy that one. Ted, thanks so much, and I hope to connect with you again on future movie projects.
Yeah, anytime, Christian. Thanks so much.
Well, thanks again for listening. Don't forget to check out HollywoodandToto.com for both the show notes and, of course, the latest entertainment news. Please follow me at Twitter @HollywoodandToto. And we'd love it if you leave a podcast review over at iTunes. See you next week.